Welcome to the first part of Postman interview question series. My goal is to prepare you for Postman interview and not only just prepare you with the common questions or the popular questions, but also teach you this concept in a Postman UI itself. With this, you will remember answers and explanation to these questions thoroughly. So the first question here is, can you explain what Postman is and its primary use cases? So answer to this question usually depends on your experience of the Postman. It's important to visualize all the things which you know about Postman while you're trying to answer this question, and be concise and precise point wise towards the answer of this question. So general theory is, yeah, Postman is a popular API testing tool which simplifies development and testing, and it's also used for creating and executing test cases and doing automation and documentation, etc. But you can also explain like what all features you have in Postman. Like for example, if you look on the screen, you have different options, like you can test HTTP request, GraphQL, gRPC, WebSockets or socket UIs. These are like type of targets which you can test with Postman API. And then we have monitoring option wherein we can create monitors which will automatically monitor your API. Additionally, we have features like collections, folders with which we can keep our test cases organized. And with collection, you can also run multiple test cases in a go in multiple iterations. We can dynamically set values to the request. We have environment variables. We can write pre-request scripts. We have console option where we can actually see what request we are sending, what response we are getting. This helps for debugging purposes. So with this answer, basically you can show how much experience you have about Postman, and you can just highlight the important features of Postman along with the primary use cases. Next question is, how do you handle authentication in Postman for API testing? For this, first we need to understand what exactly authentication is. Authentication is a security for your APIs, and authentication can be provided in various different ways. So if you want to test APIs which has authentication, you need to have access to these APIs, and this authentication is provided in many different ways, like basic authentication, OAuth authentication, API keys, etc. So Postman need to support these authentication options. So let me see how exactly this authentication work. I have one example here which is using bearer token authentication. So if I go to this request, and if you go into authorization tab and click on this types, you will see there are multiple types of authentication which covers almost all the popular authentications which are available out there. So this request which I here has bearer authentication, and you will see it's asking for token. So if I don't send anything here and just send the request, you will see that we have received 401 status, that is unauthorized, because we have not sent any token in the request. So you can just send any token for this case, but usually in real world you will have different tokens. And here you can see now the authentication is successful. When you go with the basic authentication, it is asking for username and password. So it depends on type of request and type of security which is implemented. So just try to visualize this all options and how usually we do authentication, and we get access to the APIs. You can remember this hopefully. Next question is, what are Postman collections and how do they simplify API testing? So Postman collection is basically a collection of API request. It helps us to be organized, and it also helps to make sharing easy. So I have chaining collection over here, and I have dev folder here. You can have multiple folders. You can group your collection based on the use cases which you have. When I go into collection options, you will see there are multiple options. I can share a collection. Moving is okay, this just to be organized. You can run a collection. Running collection is basically you just can run multiple requests within this collection, and you can have many iterations of this execution. If I say 3 iteration and I click run, you will see that my request will be executed. Each request will be executed 3 times. With collections, you can run interdependent steps sequentially. Like for example, if I create a user, and ID is created after creating user, so you can dynamically pass that ID to get user request, so that you can actually call the user and get successful response. In short, collection helps you to stay organized. It makes sharing easy, and it helps to run collection in collection runner where you can have sequential or interdependent test cases. Next question is, explain the purpose of environment variables in Postman. How do they work? Environment variables are basically placeholder like a general environment variable which stores values, and these values can be used across different requests or within your workspace. There are types of environment variable which are like global environment variables or a local environment variables. Let me go to this option here. You can see we have global environment variables which are available for entire workspace, and then we have a general local environment variables which you have to select from the drop down. If I select dev, only dev environment variables will be used within the test cases or within the request. If I go with the teaching environment, then only these environment variables which you see on the screen will be reflected in the test cases and in the requests. So basically by defining environment variables and referring in the request makes it easy to stay organized. Again, you can have isolation of different environments like dev and production, which you can see I have here for example. And also environments can help you in request chaining. If you want to understand request chaining, there's a video I have created separately. Request chaining in short is, let's say if I have a create user or create an order and get an order. So when I create order ID is generated dynamically, then I need to pass this ID dynamically in here. So now I'm just passing it static direct 1 2 3 4. In real world this ID will be generated dynamically, so you just need to set that ID to some environment variable and use it in place of this 1 2 3 4, something like this, and then write the environment variable name here. I also have video explaining this separately. I can link that video on the top, or you can just search in my playlist. Next question, can you demonstrate how to write and run test in Postman? To answer these questions, I would say you should answer what all things you can test with the Postman and how you will approach writing the test. To write a test, basically we need a request. So new request can be created like this. This is the one option. You can select what type of request you want to create. Then you need to select the type of request, method of the request. It can be get, post, put, anything out of these options. And then you need to write the URL of the request, and then you need to set in all the different parameters, headers, or pass the body of the request. Body type can be JSON or it can be HTML, XML as per the API documentation. This is all the request part. Now comes the test part. So test usually go under the test tab, and there are some simple snippets over here, like you want to check, let's say for example response type is less than 200 milliseconds, or you want to check that you have a successful post request. Like post requests are usually 201 and 202, right? So these are just examples. You can even write some complex test cases, but it needs some understanding of Postman. You can go into the response body and check the values of fields. That is what generally real life test cases has. So these are some things which are within the scope of testing, like response body, the contents of the response body, response headers itself, like what headers you are receiving, are they according to API specification, response time, response codes, etc. Next question is, how do you handle file uploads in Postman when testing APIs which requires file attachments? Or basically, do you know how to send a file in a Postman request? Postman allows us to send a file in the request. We need to understand how we can do that. So if you have a request, we have a body here. In body we have form data option. Let me show you one example of this, how we can achieve this. In this example we will see how to send a multi-part form type of data request, or how to send a file in your Postman request. File is sent in a Postman request using a post or a put type of request. So for this example, let's keep it as a post type of request. After selecting post, click on a body option, and on body option you will find form data option. Once you select form data, following table will be loaded. So if you scroll down over on the first key, you will see this part here, drop down with text. So if you click on the drop down, you will find file option. So select this file option. Here you will give name of your parameter, so whatever your API is accepting as a name of this file parameter. Then next you have to select file which you want to upload. Let's say if in this case I want to upload an image file, and that's it, and you can send this request. You can pass any other parameters as usual and just send your request. Now one thing to notice here is about headers. In header you will see that after selecting form data, content type header is automatically added by Postman. So there is no need of adding header, content type header from here. It's better to keep it automatic, so you can just ignore this part and just rely on your Postman to automatically detect appropriate header. If our next question is explain the concept of request chaining in Postman, when and why would you use it? This is really important question, and probably this will be definitely asked in your interviews because this is the important concept behind the testing of APIs, because APIs usually have their jobs done sequentially, like you create user, you get user, delete user, you update user. So these all things need to happen sequentially. So I will explain this in detail. Let me simply explain you what request chaining is. So let's say in first step you are creating user, and every time you hit a request you get a new user. Let me demonstrate it. So for example, this is my post, this is the body to create a request, and if I send this request, you can see that ID will change every time. 207, now it is 410. Now in collection runner, if you want to execute post first, that is create new user, and then try to get that user, right? This is your test, create user and get user, both should be successful. So for this purpose we have to pass this user ID or a page ID in our case dynamically to the get request, and that is actually called as chaining of request in Postman. So first result of first step is input of second step. So let's see a demonstration of how we can do that. So for that you will have to write a simple test. The test is pretty simple. So you have to go into the test tab. Now you know that when you create a user, ID is written in response, right? So what we have to do is we have to save this ID in environment variable, which can be used as an input to this second get request. So for that purpose you have to create an environment variable from here, this, and now I already have this page value environment with value 150, which is the default value. So since you can also create this kind of variable, I already have, so I will not recreate it. Don't save anything. Okay, and next step, as I said, we have to save this value. So we will write a simple script, read JSON response, get and set page value. Page value is basically ID field of this response, and I'm also writing a console.log to print this on console for our debugging purpose. Let's go ahead and hit this request once again, and now you can see that when I execute this post, I have already environment variable to 703. Now get should automatically get this new value when we try to execute get request, and you can see that current value under get is 703. So now what we can do is just add a simple test to print what is request of get. So with this line I can know what was actual value passed to this get request from our collection. So now let's save these two tests. So now you know that for chaining of collection we have to basically set a environment variable value which can be used as a request into the second request which we will be calling from our runner. So once again let's go ahead and run this collection. Before that I will clear this console and run. Same settings, and we will just click execute. Okay, so now you can see that in this execution both our tests are successful. Let me show you results. Both tests are pass, and first request created 275 ID user, and automatically second request get request passed page ID as 275. If I run it again, the ID is different, 784. Let me run it one more time. You can see the ID is different. So this is called chaining of Postman request, which you can use in your test cases. Like for example, you have test case where you have to create user and try to find that user and delete user, same user. You can just pass that values from response of one request into parameter of another request. Our next question is how you can schedule and automate API tests in Postman. Automation of test is one of the important features of the Postman. So we need to understand how we can do that. So this is achieved with help of monitors right over here. I will demonstrate how we can actually create a monitor and how we can set up a monitors. This feature is specifically very useful for continuous integration and regression tests of your APIs. We will try to understand uses of monitors. We will also run a monitor and try to analyze its result from a demo. Monitor feature of Postman is used to monitor your APIs. This monitor will help to schedule execution of test. This scheduled execution of test can be set into per hour execution or in a frame of few hours or a daily execution. After execution, you will get notified with an alert email in case if there are any test cases failed. So in short, we can say that monitor help you to track health of your APIs. Let's go ahead and see the demonstration of monitors. For this demonstration, we will use our collection which has two requests, a post and a get request, which will create a user and try to get a user. I have written two simple tests under each request to check the return status when we hit this request. If you check on left side of your Postman, you will find a monitors option. In monitors option, you can get an option to create a monitor right from here, or you can use a plus button over here. So let's go ahead and create our first monitor. You have to name your monitor. So let me name it as a sample monitor. We have to select a collection which we want to monitor. So now as we decided to use this collection, which we just saw. Next is selecting version tag. Since I don't have any Git integration, so I can just select current. But if your project is already using a Git integration, you can see a latest tag or any tag which you want to monitor. Next option is environment. So this collection, if requires any environment, then you have to select that environment. For my collection, I require this environment, so I am selecting this environment. Now next is the important section where we have to schedule this monitor. So scheduling is either hourly or weekly. We don't have minute timer option in a free plan, so I cannot select it. For this example, I will select per hour monitoring. You can select different hour range. I am selecting every hour. Next option is about selecting regions. Since there are many very limited options in a free section, we cannot change this to manual region. So we will just keep it whatever default option is. Next is about setting email addresses. We can set up to 5 email addresses in the free plan where you will get alert in case any test cases will fail. Next are some configurations which you can use for modifying behavior, like stop notification after. So if your test is consecutively failing and you don't want to get repeating alerts, you can stop it from here. This is important in case of billing, since under paid plan, the billing will basically limit your number of alert emails or number of requests. Even in free plan, the number of requests is only 1000. Next option is to set retry if run fails. So this is again optional if you want to retry your monitoring step or not. Next is setting request timeout or delay. These are quite easy to understand options, but I will leave it as it is for now. Let's go ahead and create our first monitor. Now you can see a run option on screen which is used for manually triggering this monitor. If I hit this run, a monitor will run manually and we will get result of our test cases. This monitor is configured to run every hour. So after 1 hour, automatically this monitor will trigger our request in collection and we will get result. Let's go ahead and run this manually and see what happens. Now you can see on your screen that sample monitor has already executed and our status of all APIs is healthy. So our tests are all passed, so it is green and healthy. You can see a couple of details like time when this test case was executed, the time taken for execution of test cases and result of each test case. You can also detail log on console about what happened during execution of this monitor. There are a couple of filtering options which you can use to filter out this result. I can rerun this monitor and check result. Again, it is healthy. Now I want to go ahead and show you what happens in case if any of the test case fails. So I will purposely write a test case which will fail. Let's go ahead and run this test through monitor, and now we know that this test is supposed to fail. So let's see what happens. Okay, here you can see that status is now unhealthy. So our API is failed and you get details of failed API, the time when it was executed, time taken, and you can also see which test actually failed. So 50% is success and 50% is failure. And if I go into this test results area, then I know that this get request has actually failed. The test of this get request has actually failed. Here on your screen you can see the type of email you will get when a test is failed. This email will have all details about the failed test and total execution of monitor. You can also edit your monitor from an option which is located on right side over here. Just click on edit and you can change things over here if you want to change timer or anything and update it. Next question is how I can import and export curl in a Postman. Curl is a popular way of calling APIs from the terminal or from the command prompt, and Postman provides a really simple way of how you can import a curl and convert that curl request into a Postman request, or you can convert your Postman request into a curl request. Let's see how we can do that with the demonstration. We will see how to convert a curl command into a Postman request. Here is a sample curl command, and usually we can just hit it from our command prompt or terminal and we get a response of a curl command from our API server. But now if you want to run this curl command from Postman, there is an easy way. Let's check it out. Find the import button on the top left side of your Postman. Here you will find number of options. Just select raw text and paste your curl command and click on continue. Okay, so curl command is imported as a Postman command and you can send this request to server and get a response from Postman. There can be more complicated curl commands, something like this, which has authorization and much more parameters. Even for this kind of commands, the same technique of import will work. Once again, just click on import button, paste the curl command, click import and see. You can see that for this command there is an additional authorization header already been generated by Postman. Now in second part, let's see how we can convert our Postman request to a curl request which we can share and execute from a terminal or a command prompt. Here is our sample request for this demonstration, and if you go on right side you will find this symbol, a code symbol. If you click on this symbol you will simply find this code snippet, and there are multiple options. If any other option is selected, you can just go and select for a curl option, and then you have this curl request, a curl equivalent request for this Postman request. You can simply copy it from here, copied snippet, and now if you go on your terminal and if you hit from your terminal, you can get response for this request from your terminal. Now similarly we can also generate a curl request for a post HTTP method. So here is a post sample command for our demonstration. So similarly you have to just go into this code option where you can generate code snippet in target, whichever you want to. Our target is curl, so we select curl, and here we have our curl post type of request. So copy this, and once again let's go and try this on terminal. Just simply paste it and enter. As you can see, we have received response for this curl request from server. Now similarly you can try to generate a curl request for delete and update type of request. Curl is a popular type, but you can see there are many more type of requests which you can convert into, like HTTP request or a Java UniRest request. You should get familiar with the curl because curl is being widely used and popularly asked in interviews. Final question in part 1: how to share or reuse Postman test cases and scripts. This question can be very important because it can prove that you have expertise in Postman. Reusing Postman test cases and scripts can be very useful when you are working with the production systems, large scale systems. You are writing many test cases, and many test cases are common across different collections or different folders in different requests. Same with the scripts. So to achieve this, we can do this with the help of eval function. Eval is a JavaScript function, and environment variables. So the idea is all our test cases or scripts which you want to share should be grouped inside a function, a JavaScript function, and then we set this function as a string in an environment variable, and then we use eval function to read this environment variable and execute it as a script. Let's see with the demonstration how we can do that. For this demonstration, I have 3 different requests here: create, update, and get. The traditional approach would be you just rewrite the same test cases in each request. Now we will learn how we can actually write it once and share with different requests. Before that, let me hit this request and show you that we have 6 test cases here. Don't care about the result. Step 1 for sharing this test cases will be you have to encapsulate this all request within a function. The syntax of function is something like this. This is a base tests, that the function name. You can just cut and paste this test cases within this function. So now all your test cases are basically in this function, and if I try to run this request again, you will see that test cases are not executed because now we have a function for this test cases. If you want to execute this test cases, you will have to call this function. You can see test cases are executed. In step 2, we will set this function as an environment variable so that we can use this variable in all different test cases. We will just create one environment variable, call it base test, and then you convert your function into a string to save it as a string. So now if I call this request, you will see test cases are not executed. That's fine, but if you focus on environment variables and go into this environment variable, you will see our test cases have been written here. This means that we can use this environment variable in any different collections or request. Step 3, for calling this test cases from this request, you just need to call eval function. Eval is a JavaScript function which actually gets the text code of the JavaScript, which is this function in this example, and it will evaluate and execute it. So let me show what happens when you send this request. So you can see tests are being executed now. Now it's pretty easy to share this test cases with different requests. You just need to copy and paste this. You don't need to write all the test cases. You just need to use this one line eval, and you use this environment variable. And now when I call this request, you can see 6 test cases are invoked. I can do same with the third request, and you will see like all 6 test cases are been invoked. You can even go into different collection. Let's say this is a different collection, and I'm removing this test and just adding this eval function, and you can see we have executed 6 tests. So that's all in the part 1 of this Postman interview questions series. I hope you understand the topics thoroughly. If you have any doubts or if you have any suggestions, please write them in the comments. Also, if you have any suggestion about the topic or the interview questions which you want me to explain in detail, please write down in the comments. I will definitely try to create a video on those topics. Thank you very much for watching. All the best.